Hello, dear fellow aquarium enthusiasts. Welcome to a little break. We have a lot of different aquatic pets, but today we are diving into the enchanting world of axolotls. Well, axolotls aren't your average amphibians. They are like the perpetual teenagers of the aquatic world. And they do have some quirks about them that make them utterly fascinating. So, what's the deal with these little guys? Axolotls are also known as the Mexican walking fish. They are a species of salamander that never quite grew up. They exhibit a trait called neotenous, meaning they retain their juvenile features throughout their entire lives. If you find the salamander in the wild or in any other place in an aquarium, they will look like an axolotl in the beginning of their lives. But then they shift and change into the actual salamanders as we know them. Axolotls never do that. So they are forever young, one could say. Not a bad gig, right? They originate from the ancient and some say mystical Lake Xochimilco in Mexico. Axolotls are more than just cute faces. In the wild, they are actually critically endangered due to habitat loss and pollution. If you keep them responsibly, you're not just adding a unique pet to your tanks, you're participating in conservation efforts for a species teetering on the brink. So, what do axolotls actually need to have a perfect home? The tank size should be a minimum of 20 gallons or around 80-90 liters for a single axolotl. Bigger is always better because they appreciate the space. They are cold water creatures, so they thrive in temperatures between 60 to 64 Fahrenheit or 16 to 18 centigrades. Higher temps can stress them out, so the tank needs to be kept really cool. In our case, we do have a water chiller. In the beginning we didn't, and it was also very stressful for us. We kept the water temperature by doing very frequent water changes, always monitoring, and then we did some do-it-yourself cooler with an old fridge and so on. It also did not keep our stress low, so in the end we ended up getting an actual water cooler, and since then it's very relaxing. We know that the water will never go above 18 centigrades or 64 Fahrenheit. For substrate we have sand, and or a bare bottom tank is ideal, so avoiding gravel because they are very curious, they can ingest it, and it leads to impaction. So just bare sand or bare tank is the best for these creatures. We also have some decorations, some caves for them to hide because they're quite sensitive to light, and we keep the tank mostly just with natural light. It's in the basement, so it's not too strong, and we turn on the light a few hours a day for the sake of the plants, but also to kind of simulate some of the actual day stages and changes. For filtration, they prefer a gentle flow. Some people have a sponge filter and it works well. In our case, we do have a bucket filter, a container filter outside. It's also what pumps the water through the water cooler, so otherwise we wouldn't have cool water if there was no pump pushing it through. What we do is the tank is quite big, and also we have a spreader on the tip of the hose at the surface of the water, so it keeps it not with a lot of current, and the water keeps oxygenated as well because it's not just stopped in the top. So for diet, what we feed our axolotls when they were younger and junior, quite small, we mainly fed them with pellets. So there are pellets specially designed for amphibians. They are sinking, but axolotls don't see that well. We didn't want the water to get dirty, so they are pampered. So we feed them to their mouths with pincers, holding the food, and that never changed. So from pellets we went to bloodworms as well. They are great for juveniles. They still love them. We feed them also with shrimp, peeled shrimp raw. We cut it in little pieces and give it to them. Earthworms from our garden, and small frozen fish. We unfreeze it and we give it to them. They love them. Now, the particular thing about diet and axolotls is, at least in our case, we realized that they are not one and the same. So they have their own personal taste. We used to have 3 axolotls, 1 male, 2 females, but we ended up giving the male to another aquarist, because having a male and females meant they kept on laying eggs, they kept on trying to multiply, and it was quite stressful for the females. So and we didn't want them to breed, because they were actually siblings, so genetically not the greatest thing. So we ended up giving the male away. And now with the 2 females, we can also see that one of them loves earthworms, for instance. The other one hates them. She can't stand them. Bloodworms, they're the favorite of the one that hates the earthworms. With small fish, they both love it, but the point is they are their own little creatures. So they are not like one and the same. They have their own preferences, and you can quite fast see that. Axolotl skin is quite delicate and permeable, so the best way is to not touch them. They are better at being admired than handled. The tank should be set up in a place where you can spend time watching them. They have a way of mesmerizing you with their gentle movements and quirky behaviors, but again, hands off. There were a couple of times that we had to handle them, because they are susceptible to fungus and stuff like that, and we had to treat them, but that's pretty much the only time we touch them. The tank mates for axolotls, well, you might wonder, but is the thing. Axolotls are actually quite solitary, and they can be a bit snappy with others. So keeping them alone is generally the safest bet. If you have more than one, they should be about the same size and have plenty of space to avoid accidental nibbles. It also depends on where you get your axolotls, because the good breeders of axolotls keep them separate from a very young age. The reason is that when they are born, when they hatch from their eggs, they go through a cannibalistic stage. If they are together, that is a habit that they get that will probably stay with them for the rest of their lives. If the axolotls are separated through their cannibalistic stage, they don't experience it, and when it's over, then they will not get as much of that temptation to nibble on their fellow axolotls in the aquarium. So it's always important to check with before you get one on what were the conditions that the breeder had them. In our case, we never experienced any nibbling. They are actually quite friendly towards each other. So I'm guessing, because we didn't knew better before, that they were actually well kept. For good health, they are quite pretty easy to keep. It's pretty straightforward, especially if you have a large tank like we do. So they need regular water changes. I would say 20% every other week in our case, because it's a huge tank. It has a very good filtration. If it's a smaller tank or a sponge filter, I would probably go for 20 to 30% water weekly. It's also good to keep an eye on the water parameters, having a test kit to check for ammonia, nitrate levels, always trying to keep them at 0. And then watching your axolotls for any warning signs. Loss of appetite, starting to float, curled gills could indicate stress or illness. In our case, we have 2 axolotls, and actually the smaller one, she's a little smaller. We got her a bit knowing, because we could see that she had a curled tail and so on, that there were some issues with her. But the store where we got it from, it was closing, and we felt pity because she was being left behind, and we took care of her, knowing that, well, probably it's going to be a bit different in how long she lives and so on. But she is now with us for close to 5 years. The very special thing that happened to her just a few months back was she completely changed color. So she was gray, and now she's, or wild as we call it here, and now she is completely white, like her fellow in the aquarium, like the leucistic. So we initially thought, okay, this is it. It's her time. We treated her, and the treatment we do when we think there's either fungus or something is we actually take the axolotl out of the aquarium, put them in a container, a plastic container, with cool water and some black tea. So black tea is great to kill any fungus they have. It is something that they do not suffer with if you put some black tea, again cooled, not hot of course, and you leave them there for a few hours, and you do this for a few days, and fungus goes away. There is a more extreme treatment which involves using salt in the water. We've never needed to do that, and we always avoided it because we know it is painful for them. So it's really a last instance thing that we know we could do, but we never did it because we always start with black tea, and it's enough. On our tank, we also keep some caves, so they can shelter themselves from light or be cozy. We have one which was kind of a vase in clay, and we cut off the entrance. The big cave we actually found in a pet shop, and it's for reptiles, for terrariums. So that's another trick. Look around in terrarium stores and reptile, because some of the things can actually work for your aquarium. In this case, this is a fiberglass cave, and it sank perfectly. They love it as well. So on closing thoughts, I think axolotls are a great pet. You should think of it more as a Zen garden, so it's not super active. Please consider that axolotls can live long, so they can live 20 years if they're treated with care and properly. So it's not something that, okay, I really like axolotls, and you keep them just for a few years, and it's a done deal. It can become expensive, particularly because of the water cooler or chiller, which is, in our case, it costed something like $500 for a chiller for this aquarium size. So it's not the simplest in that aspect. But once you have or if you have a big tank, proper filtration, a big chiller, then you should be fine. Also, they only eat a couple of times a week once they are fully grown. So even if you need to give their food as we do to them, they are fine. It's not too much of a trouble. It's actually our meditation stage, even though the water is a bit cool. On a bit of curiosities, axolotls, they are quite special. They have the ability to grow limbs again. So anything that, if an accident happens and they lose a limb or any other thing, they regenerate. The only thing is that if a hand might have not the same exact number of fingers after it regenerates, but they do get the limb back. So there are actually studies on these lovely creatures. So if I forgot something, if there's any further questions you have, don't hesitate, just drop it in the comments. I will gladly help and tell you what we have done for the past 5 years with our lovely axolotls. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget, it's the usual thing, hit subscribe. We'll keep on doing these full-fledged guides on our pets. So if you're interested, just follow it. Thank you. See you soon.